Well, hello everybody. Carlton Pearson here. You're welcome to Streaming Consciousness, Expanded Consciousness, where we each week or each time I share with you try to provoke you and expand you and somehow challenge you to think outside the box and to rethink, re-knowing and renewing yourself and what I call evolving in consciousness to some sense of self-actualization or self-realization. And I'm 62 years old, and I'm starting all over again almost every day and loving the curiosity that I enjoy. It's fascinating to be curious and to enjoy what your curiosity finds out. No is a very boring, non-distinct term. Yes is full of curiosity and adventure. It's an interesting term. So I'm saying yes anew. Yes to this last half of my life, and I'm doing a lot of exploring. Haven't been on live in a while. We tape it now. We have usually 2 to 4 cameras in here, and we prepare things that I can take on the road later. But and I did 4 shows last time, but I wanted to talk to you live tonight on some of the current events, particularly the election, and something I posted today online, which already has had quite a response. I don't generally make a lot of comment about politics. I don't usually take sides of a particular candidate, but I am taking sides with a particular concept, a particular consciousness with regard to America. And politics is supposed to be about civil rights. Policy, all these words come from polis, which is the word that means citizen or city. Metropolis is the mother city, metropolis, the large city where the citizens live. So when you talk about policy, that's civil rules. Politics is civil rights. Polity is civil worship. Polity. Police, from the same concept, civil force. You have civil rights, civil rules, civil worship, civil behavior, that would be politeness. Policy, police, polite, polity, all those terms are interacting, and they're all based out of the idea of citizenry, or a citizen, or a city, state. 70% of Americans no longer believe that absolute truth, or believe in absolute truth. 70% of Americans no longer believe, supposedly, a recent statistic said, in absolute truth. That which is accurate, when I say truth, that which is precise and exact. I'll do a whole series on You Shall Know the Truth, what really the mystery of the truth. That'll start in a week or two, and you'll love what I bring out about it. The word absolute means not qualified or diminished, not quantified or diminished in any way, not subject to any limitations, unconditional. What do you know that is? Polity and politics are not an exact science. They're speculative. Like faith is not knowing but believing. I'm more into believing or into knowing, if you will, than belief. Faith is for people who don't know. When you know something in your soul or in your cells based on the experience of the soul, not the cells, not of the mind alone, you don't need to believe that. But you can, and you generally do believe what you know. A lot of you don't know what you believe. You believe only what you know, but a lot of people don't know what they believe. And so politicians and strong, charismatic people with thundering rhetoric and pulpit presence and stage presence can manipulate masses of people. It's been done for centuries in all cultures, fear and manipulation. And Donald Trump is a master at that. Nothing, Dr. Martin Luther King said, nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscious stupidity. Nothing in all the world, said Dr. Martin Luther King, is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscious stupidity. Stupidity just means lack of good sense or judgment. That is dangerous, and we see it a lot in Congress. We see it a lot on the streets, particularly in mid-America, where commoners are manipulated by the media, whatever they're told they believe. And they bank on it, or what they read in some magazine or some tabloid. So far, this president election season may be the most toxic, word means poison, in recent history, if not ever. The toxicity largely comes from the candid vitriol, crude and bitter criticism by that word vitriol, that freely flows out of Trump's mouth, and accordingly his camp. I like him. I like a lot of the guys that are out there, but I don't trust any of them explicitly. And it's hard to trust politicians. It's hard to trust their agendas. Most of them are self-centered and self-serving. We know this. We've known it for years. Every once in a while, a really benevolent person comes by. And sometimes they start out with goodwill, benevolence, and they end up corrupted because that's the language of the dance that they have, the music there in those circles. Especially when big money is controlling politicians and lobbyists are manipulating politicians. They're no longer serving the people. It's never the will of the people. It's not justice by a government of the people, by the people. That has been gone a long time. This doesn't concern me as much as the supportive response that Donald is receiving, that millions of Americans, particularly Christians, have toward him, towards this support that they have toward him, his spirit, which many describe as his energy. His spirit is toxic. His words are toxic. His charisma is toxic. Rat poison is 90% good corn. It's the 10% strychnine that makes it lethal. And I understand the anxiety and the disappointment and the disenchantment and disillusionment that many Americans, maybe most Americans, have with their political leaders. We're very embarrassed. I happen to admire President Obama for a number of reasons. And first of all, he's one of the most resisted presidents in recent history. When will the head of a Congress actually say our number one objective is to make sure this man gets nothing done, that he fails, and that he is a one-term president? He won landslide both times. So that says something about his appeal. I'm not going to go, he's not running for office. I'm not going to go into a lot of stuff on Obama. Millions, of course, admire him around the world. One lady responded to this post by saying, many white conservative evangelicals ultimately want a tribal leader who panders to their fear and insecurities and flatters their rancid provincialism. Provincialism means narrow-mindedness or insulary or lack of sophistication. Just simple people. And you find out they pack the Maybe Center here. Trump is playing masterfully to them, she says. And he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows that he's playing into their fears, into their anxiety, into their ignorance, and into their arrogance. Americans are proud, pompous people, self-righteous people. We think we're the chosen nation and the chosen people and the greatest power on the planet. We hear that a lot. I remember the pride I felt when I said the pledge of to the allegiance, pledged my allegiance to the flag, and when I heard the Star Spangled Banner sang, or when I sang "God Bless America" or "America the Beautiful." I mean, we really had strong patriotism in our schools in the 50s and 60s. Now, they don't even say the Pledge of Allegiance in a lot of schools today, but millions of Americans, my generation and on, and really the one following me, had a certain kind of almost worshipful regard for this country and for its principles and presidents, generally. So Trump knows what he's doing. Nobody, especially the Republican Party, expected him to get this far. That is amusing to me. Not so much confusing as amusing. I like a lot of Americans. I want them all out of there. I want new people. I think these career politicians, that's why Cruz and the others are having such difficulty. Dr. Carson seemed to be doing well. He didn't have the spunk. He didn't have the sparkle. He didn't have that energy. Nobody can compete with that who's running for office if he can't compete with Trump's high energy. And he's been that way all the time. He's not doing anything but being who he is. He's honest and alert and aware. He's a businessman. He's a hustler. He's a dealer. He's smart. And he knows what he's doing. Now, Donald Trump and Sara Palin, I posted this, packed the Maybe Center on the campus of ORU this yesterday. thousands of evangelical Christians, along with dozens of pastors, flooded the 10,000-seat arena, many proudly posting their pictures with the candidate on Facebook and Instagram and other social media outlets. You can possibly imagine how I felt, because as an inclusionist, having been disallowed to use the Maybe Center because of the gospel of inclusion. I mean, my last Azusa conference was held downtown at the convention center because I had too much love, believed that God loved everybody and that Christians weren't the only ones going to heaven. At that time, it wasn't out that I didn't believe in a literal hell, because I did. I just didn't believe anybody would be in it. Since then, I've evolved to the place where I don't believe in the hell we've been taught through our Bible interpreters. That Jesus never used the word hell, he used the word Gehenna. Jesus didn't speak English. Certainly he's not 16th century King's English. He didn't speak much Greek, a little bit of street language, possibly a few words in Latin, because Jerusalem was an occupied city, and Latin, the Roman Empire was in charge. He spoke Aramaic, and the New Testament is not written in Aramaic or Hebrew. It's written in Greek. It was spoken mostly in Arabic or Hebrew. So, and Jesus had certain political pull. That's why the Roman government had him executed. And the religious people wanted him dead because he was bucking religion. The Roman government wanted him dead because they heard that he was doing political things like becoming, quote unquote, king of the Jews. That was never his ambition. He actually said, my kingdom is not of this world, when Pilate asked him about that. Anyway, ORU is my alma mater. It's run by very conservative people, far more conservative than Oral himself was. Remember, I spent 40 years of my life working very close to and with him. Not only as an alumnus of the university, but I was on the Board of Regents for 16 years. I was an associate evangelist for 2 years. He had told me personally when I was 25 years old that he wanted me to be the president. By the time I was 35 years old, he wanted me to get 10 years of experience. Of course, he told that to several of my other colleagues, including Billy Joe and I think Larry Lee and maybe Kenneth Copeland. He talked to me about other people in case Richard didn't work out, which he didn't, but anyway, I just had a lot of intimate time with him. A lot of the people who attended that conference from ORU, including the administration, faculty, and staff, would be shocked to find out that Oral actually voted for Obama. He told me that with his own mouth. He voted for him. He didn't get to vote for him the second time because Oral had made his transition before the election. But he admired this black, charming, brilliant man, he told me, who had represented so much to so many people of color and ethnicities, including Native Americans or Indians, which Oral Roberts was, Cherokee. And we talked about race relationships a lot. Oral was for the underdog. He was a kind, gentle man. He voted democratically a lot rather than Republicans. He told me with his own mouth that he didn't believe that people catch homosexuality, but they're born with that propensity or that capacity, including his own son, who committed suicide. He told me, he said, contrary to what my other friends believe, I believe that men and women are born that way. We had a 3.5-hour conversation about Oral's opinions about a lot of things, and he was in his 80s at that time, not just a few years before he made his transition. Evelyn was there in that conversation. I know the man's spirit. A lot of the people there don't even know his spirit. They know some of his writings, they've heard some of his sermons, but I knew the man's spirit, and some of those there still do. Anyway, he called it the Magnificent Maybe Center. And interestingly enough, most of those students have no idea and don't know what the man believes. Trump quotes, when he goes to Liberty University, 2 Corinthians. Liberty is a kind of rival, if you will, to our ORU, also a learning institution associated with the evangelical fundamentalist movement or community. Ours is more charismatic or Pentecostal in orientation than Liberty University, Jerry Falwell, and the Baptist group, Southern Baptist. Very, very conservative, very, very fundamentalist. But Trump went there, and he's trying to impress them by finding, you should know the truth, stand there fast in the liberty with Christ, or however the word. He found one of the words for liberty in the Bible, and he used it, and he just manipulated it. And they knew what he was doing. He basically made a fool of himself, but he said enough, had enough vitriol and enough conservative thumping of progressives that they basically supported him. So we pack off the Mabee Center. We don't want to let Liberty look better than us. So probably most of the 3,000 or 4,000 students on campus were encouraged to attend the event, and they did. And it was sponsored and hosted, if you will, not sponsored, but hosted by ORU. Trump's playing to the evangelicals. He knows exactly what he's doing, like Karl Rove did with George Bush. I prayed with and for George Bush when he was still living in the governor's mansion in Texas. I went into the White House when Herbert W., his father, was president. They had files on me in there. I went in and out of the White House for years. And I was in the conservative camp. I was actually a Republican at the time. So I know the antics. I know the games they play. And I knew what Karl Rove, James Robinson told me with his own mouth, and Karl Rove was about as spiritual as an old shoe, and yet he was feeding to the fear-based theologies of the fundamentalist world. Is nothing about people like Karl Rove that's quote-unquote Christian or fundamentalist at all. They're liberals. They do what they want to do. But when it comes to fiscal conservatism and capitalism and money, they play into the hands of the fundamentalists who, like a bunch of dumb sheep. Do you know sheep are the dumbest animals that God created? Sheep don't catch mice. They don't fetch sticks and balls. They don't talk. You can't even ride them. They have to be led. They're slumbering buffoons in one sense, like some shepherds, unfortunately. Anyway, it was often it was obvious that Trump doesn't read the Bible a lot, has not sat through a lot of Bible studies. He would have known that the normal way to address 2 Corinthians is that way, 2 Corinthians. It's not wrong to say 2 Corinthians or 1 Corinthians, but that's not the lingo of the church, of religious people, particularly fundamentalists who are Bible-toting folks, with a lot of Bible bazookas and Bible bullets to shoot at people. So he kind of messed up, but they still like him. And the thing that comes out of him is a lot of racism and bigotry and misogyny and chauvinism. He comes across abrasive. He's a circus, and he's fun to listen to and watch. And he has this teenager, junior high school mentality about getting back at people verbally, and we called it capping and basing in those days. I don't know, they call it something else today, but he's good. Black folks in the ghetto, we were good, on our spontaneous, quick on our feet. He's about that way. That's his New York mentality. He's not really a conservative, not a Christian fundamentalist type conservative. He is a bigot, and he has legitimate fears as a white man that they're losing their majority in the country. The white man is losing his majority. In fact, and I don't want to sound racist, and I know I do. I don't mean to, but I got to make these points tonight because we are dealing with race issues. We're dealing with economic issues and caste systems and white privilege and black privilege. I mean, there's certain blacks that have a certain attitude of arrogance as well. Many. I know about all of that. But in this situation, with African Americans, Latin Americans, Asian Americans, the white man is no longer the majority in this country, or he's losing his majority and becoming the minority. Because all these ethnic groups from all over the world are coming to our teeming shores, as the Statue of Liberty says, give me your tithe, your poor. They're coming from all the Middle East, the Far East, the Near East, Europe, included. Mexicans have been coming across the border. I lived 5 miles north of it for the first 7 years of my life. From age 4 to age 10, I did. So, and a lot of Mexican friends, I can speak the language. I can read it better. And when I go into Spanish-speaking countries, I speak in their language. I preach in Spanish and sing in Spanish. And I do my introductions in the language of whatever country I'm in, and I've done that for 30 years as a compliment and salutation to the language and the culture that I'm speaking to. So Trump included Sara Palin purportedly to attract this group, these evangelicals, and they pull them away from Ted Cruz. who is probably much more of a legitimate evangelical, but most politicians are not men of great prayer and holiness and conviction. A lot of them are very passionate, and the Christians do pray nominal prayers like anybody else, but in this state, the state of Oklahoma, if you mention faith and mention the church, you have to. God bless you. I'm a man of faith. Show your wife that you're married. Interject that you have faith. That's all you can't make it into a political office in this state and in many states in the Midwest or in Middle America without having a pretty profound faith. Call yourself a God-fearing man, a church-going man, a Sunday school teacher, or whatever. All that really works in your favor because we're religious people. We're tribal by nature, and we're religious by nature, and we're territorial by nature. Humans tend to be that way. Cruz is the establishment is pouncing on him too, and they're pouncing on Trump, but now they're leaning toward Trump, I should say, because Trump seems to have the crowds. He's got the power. So far, it seems for Trump to have Sara Palin, it seems to be working for him. Even though Sara is a charismatic, tongue-talking fundamentalist Christian, but she stated publicly that our American forces under Trump's leadership ought to whip or kick ISIS's ass. She said that on the campus. I don't think that term's ever been used in the Mabee Center publicly or on the ORU campus publicly. None of the students can say it without being chided. You can get actually expelled for cursing on that campus. But ORU's administration invites them on, and when Sara walks on the stage, everybody goes nuts because she's the Christian. You think that's the only time she cusses? Her daughter has had a couple of kids outside of wedlock, and she speaks in tongues, went to a charismatic church. That was what got Sara into them back in Alaska. The son, they're all around tongue-talking Christians, worshiping God and praising God and quoting Scripture. The son, and they got the gall to say that it's Obama's fault. Nobody's crimes are Obama's fault. Nobody's crimes are anybody's fault but their own fault, but their own. So how they rationalize these things, it's befuddling to me. Of course, she gets rousing applauses for her statements, even though she uses curse words, and that language is not permissible on ORU. So what we're dealing with here is a very distinct, obvious misstep in the way we think and act as Christians. What is the Christ-like approach? What really would Jesus do in this situation? Race relations are at an all-time high and an all-time low. You have more black prominent people in positions of leadership and authority, professionals, experts, anything from seismology to archaeology. Blacks are everywhere, from the White House to the courthouse to the schoolhouse to the church house. We have judges and sheriffs and attorneys and corporate executives and billionaires. We have Oprahs and Michael Jordans, and we had the Michael Jackson. I mean, blacks have made great strides, and yet places like South Chicago, where I lived, I didn't live in South Chicago, but I lived in Chicago for 5 years, and the black-on-black crime there's off the chain. We focus on a white cop shooting a black man without a gun, when there may be a black young man shooting 8 black people who older women or little children. Black-on-black crime in South Chicago, in Detroit, Baltimore, Philadelphia, D.C., everywhere. I think they draw our attention to the one white cop, and there's too many of them, shooting black unarmed people, and let us ignore the blacks killing the blacks. Just let the niggas kill the niggas is the attitude. Let them kill themselves. We could stop the war in Syria. We can change things in the Middle East. But it's Arabs killing Arabs, Muslims killing Muslims, Sunnis killing Shias, beheading, disemboweling, cutting off limbs. So let them kill each other. It's genocide. We don't know what's happening. Muslims killing Muslims or Christians in Africa. That's happening. Hundreds of thousands of people are being tortured and killed as we speak in that country. Have you heard anything about it on the news? Not at all. And the whole world is watching Trump's words and the big crowds that follow him puts America in a totally different light. It's shameful. It's embarrassing that image of a red-faced, redneck billionaire who can throw his weight around and basically buy the White House. I don't think he'll necessarily win against Hillary I forgot the other man's name, and I like him so much. You know who I'm talking about, the man running against the senator from Connecticut, I think, or Rhode Island. This is going to be testy, and I don't know that Hillary is going to be extraordinary as the first lady. I mean, as the president, and Bill Clinton, the first gentleman. I think they'll make a powerful team because they're basically career politicians. They'll be somewhat business as usual, but she'll be the first female, like Obama was the first African. I expect there'll probably be an openly gay president in my lifetime. These are kinds of transitions that are pretty powerful and pretty pivotal. To some people, they're pathetic. To other people, they're prophetic. But things are changing, and the people who think they're in control are not in control. Toxicity means poison, and there's so much toxicity coming out of that particular camp, the Trump camp, in his mouth. And again, I can handle that, but it's this incredible interest of the masses of people, even a lot of blacks. I know some of those, just about every black person that has spoken, preacher that has spoken for Clinton or showed up at his meetings. And I was invited to some of the early ones in Atlanta. I had calls from brethren calling me saying, show up. I said, no way would I show up. I just wouldn't. First, I'm not going to, nothing he could say that would make me vote for him, though some of the things he says do, turn me on. I like some of the things that he says with regard to Washington and the lackluster leadership that Congress has given, and that some of those old stooges that have been in there too long are not doing anything but padding their pockets and getting their pensions ready and their retirement and what kind of money they're going to make when they're out of office, and what kind of money they're going to raise to stay in office. I understand all that. And he's peeping their cards. He's making them look really, really bad. The Republican Party will never look or be the same again. I don't think conservatives will ever dominate this country again the way they have in the past. That's how rapidly things are happening. I mean, things are changing before our very eyes. The church is changing. The church world is changing. The present Pope has said a lot of the things I've been saying for the last several years. He's been almost worshipped for it, and I've been demonized for saying it. Billy Graham's even saying some of the things, or has said, before he was incapacitated. Franklin makes him look like an ultra-conservative. Billy Graham isn't that. He told me with his own mouth. I had almost a full day with him during the Oklahoma bombing here, and he opened up his heart to me. He said that he thought that after 50 years of preaching the gospel around the planet, he thought the world had gotten worse, even here in America. He was stunned and shocked that he's been called to Oklahoma City, of all cities, to eulogize nearly 200 people who are dead as a result of the worst act at that time of terrorism on American soil. He was befuddled by it. And we talked about it. We talked about his Parkinson's disease. We talked about his trips overseas and how long it took him to take ship rides to India. And he couldn't use supersonic jets back in those days. He and Oral Roberts and that group in the 40s were going overseas in 50s. So he really changed. He said, I'm not gonna try to convert people. I just want to convince them that they're loved by God and redeemed by Christ. He used that exact terminology, but that's the terminology I use, and that's my modus operandi for this time. So anyway, water is colorless. There's a lot of trouble about toxicity in water, and I'm going to stop. From Detroit to California to various cities in our country, the water is contaminated. Lead, chlorine. Water is a colorless, transparent, odorless, tasteless liquid that forms the seas and the lakes and the rivers on this planet, and rain. And it's the basic fluids of all living essence or living organisms. Now, nothing is closer in essence and nature to the spirit, or that to spirit, than water. So water represents a contamination in a metaphysical and metaphorical way. All this contaminated water represents contaminated energy, contaminated spirit on this planet. That the infrastructure has broken down, and people are getting bad water and drinking it and becoming sick and getting rashes, and some are dying. Some of the stuff that's been coming out in politics is bad water. Let me warn you. The infrastructure is broken down. The pipes are corroded and old. And they're taking water and shifting it from different sources. And different bodies of water have different types of bacteria in it. All water has some bacteria in it. There's such thing as good bacteria. And then there's bad bacteria. But they all work together in the right place. So I'm making that analogy as I close, that you should check your spirit. The scripture says, test the spirits. See, are they of God or of good? Are they really pure? Where there's bad fruit, there's bad root. Okay? Look at the fruit of what people say. Look at the fruit of their lives, how they live. And not just what they say, but what they produce in consciousnness. What you discern that's coming out of them. That's very important. I need to stop. I told you I'd go about 30 minutes. I'm sort of shortening these brief talks. But anyway, I wanted to talk about the election because Sara Palin and Trump was here yesterday. Sara Palin's like a little high school girl. She doesn't belong in the White House. She doesn't belong in any high place of authority and leadership. And she was a big backer of Senator Kane. Did he win? So her getting behind Trump doesn't mean he's going to win. He may not even win the primary. I think he will, but not because of her. He's bringing her in not for primary elections. He's bringing her in for the general election to get the conservatives. If he wins the nomination by the party, well, they're going to get behind him and do everything they could, as they did for the last Republican who ran against Obama. And I think Hillary, if you just consider women alone and Hispanics and most ethnic groups, she'll have a large group of African Americans backing her. Black folk love her husband, and which means they indirectly love her and will love her more. She's a strong lady. As far as qualifications, nobody is more qualified, having been 8 years in the governor's mansion in Arkansas, 8 years in the White House as the first lady, and then a senator for several years, a few, and then the Secretary of State. She knows what she's doing. And it's not just who you know, it's who knows you, and a lot of people know her. So her chances to win are really high. And I'm not saying vote for her or vote or don't vote for Trump. I am saying consider the spirit and the energy around what they say and look at their lifestyles. And what do you feel? Trustworthy as far as the virtue and valor of the person. Okay? Food for thought, marinated on a little bit, and next week I'll start this series, and it's very powerful. I have 4 different parts on the mystery or the mystery of truth. What is truth? Who can really identify it? You will love the response I believe the Spirit gave me with regard to that interesting subject. I love you. I believe in you. God bless you. And of course, as I like to say, God be you. Good night. Oh, by the way, wait. Send some support money, would you? I don't ask for it very much. In the new presentations, I never ask for it. I do live ask you to donate something. I've done so much. I make a living off speaking. And this New Thought group doesn't give the way the fear-based folk did. Sometimes I figure if I preach more hell and more fear and against the Antichrist or something, I'd probably get more money. So if you like what I'm saying, you relate to what I'm saying, and I know many people don't, but many people do. What's $10 or $20 occasionally? You don't have to do it every time, because I put all that stuff on the internet. It's free. I'm going to try to monetize it at some point, because I have to live. I lost everything when I began to preach inclusion. And it's been a miracle that we've survived and maintained a decent lifestyle. So I've gone through, 2015 was a horrible year in a lot of ways. It was a year of a lot of victimization, but it was a year of victory. There was no victory without victimization. So I went through that. This time a year ago, I was on here talking to you about the death of my godmother. She had made a transition. She was 90 years old. She died in one day. Next month, February, my dad's baby brother and only living brother at the time made his transition. And then in March, 2 days after my birthday, my dad made his transition. So I've had some personal issues that have been very painful for me, and I'm still in the midst of traversing all of that, trying to keep a good attitude and a positive spirit and operate in love only and entirely, and celebrating the good and not amplifying what you would consider less than good. Everything is good because everything is God. So it all ultimately works out okay. All right. I love you. Good night again. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your consciousness. We'll see you again next week or the next time you tune in, even to our archives. Thanks for daring to think anew. Good night.